Yes.
I thought you said the vav means hook.
It does mean hook, and that's the purpose of a hook. What does a hook do?
Catches.
I'm sorry?
Pulls in. Catches or pulls in.
A hook connects two things, like your drapery hook.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of a hook, is to connect two things.
So are you saying that it also means and?
In Hebrew, if you have a word, if I say ani v'at, I just said I, me, and you.
Okay.
That's the word. The letter vav at the beginning of a word means and.
Why was his name changed to begin with?
Because he embodied this quality. So when somebody embodies a quality, so in this case, his name is changed. I don't know anything about who changed his name, how he's referred to. Hashem changed his name, and it's given to him as a badge of honor to add this vav to his name, because he was the embodiment of someone who could connect the dots and come to the right conclusion about what he saw and heard. As we said, that those other nations, they saw each dot, but they did not connect the dots. And if they did, they didn't do anything about it. So you have to see the dots, connect the dots, come to the right conclusion, and act on it. And that is what Yitro embodies. So this vav becomes like the symbol of that. It's like his, what do they call it? His superpower. His superpower was to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Sure. And then that also helps him be able to see the good. Because when you connect the dots and you see the whole picture, then you can have a different perspective than when you don't. He also had the advantage of being able to, because he was coming from the outside. Sometimes when you're in it, you don't see it. That's why a lot of times various revolutions or whatever are fomented by somebody from the outside. Somebody who's somewhat external, which honestly has always been the Jewish people. There's a very interesting book called There is a Certain People. That's a phrase from the Megillah that Haman says to Ahasuerus. It says, what is some of the qualities, the uniqueness of the Jewish people? One of them is that we have actually always been outsiders. No matter how long we've ever lived in any country or place, there's something about us that is always the outsider. Everyone is always sure to remind us of that we don't really belong. So while we don't like that, there is a certain perspective. It's kind of like it's like having the external consultant come in and advise you about your business. It's like, shouldn't you know the most because you're in it? It's like, not necessarily, because when you're in it, you don't see it. And so Yitro was like the outside consultant. Renee.
I'm sorry, this is kind of a Hebrew grammar question, but the vav is at the end of the word, so does it have so you don't pronounce the vis sound?
Right, so and in his case, it actually turns into a vowel. So then it gets a little bit more complicated because a vav can also be used for the vowel of o or u. So for him, it turns into an o vowel, but the letter is still there. And yes, it would have been much better if they named his name Vitar and they put the vav at the beginning, but they didn't. They made it Yitro, so it's still there.
Thank you.
Darlene, yes, sure.
I don't think I've ever heard of someone being named Yitro. It's not, you would think that it'd be such an awesome name to have associated with your child, but I don't think I've ever heard of a child named Yitro.
No, we do not use the name. We do not use the name. It's very interesting. You'd think we would, because it certainly has only great things associated.
Like a jersey.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, we use like Batya, which was Pharaoh's daughter's name. So it's not like we have an aversion to that, but I've never ever heard of anyone named Yitro.
Yeah. Interesting.
He remains unique. So the question from Danielle, the tent pegs, those were not the vavs, they were the hooks. The hooks were the vav, the vavim. So, and they secured the panels. So, yeah, not that, don't really ask me about building, put me into Home Depot and spin me around and I'll just walk right out. So I don't really know anything about it, but I remember that the vavs are the hooks, they're the vavim. All right, so this is our wonderful Yitro. So now we're starting to really see, like, we must have Yitro before we stand at Sinai. To not have Yitro and the lessons from him and what he teaches us would make us completely ill-equipped to receive the Torah. It would have just been just a monumental, overwhelming event. We would be in no way prepared to know, how do I live with this Torah? What is my Jewish life going to be like? Who's my role model? How should I act? How should I behave? All right. The next thing about Yitro is that he is the very first one recorded to have said Baruch Hashem. He's the first one who ever said Baruch Hashem. And that is on page 397 also, chapter 18, verse 10. And it says, Yitro said, Vayomer Yitro, Baruch Adonai, which we say is Baruch Hashem, who has rescued you from the hand of Egypt and from the hand of Pharaoh. He's the one who says, wow, Hashem did this. It could have just said like, wow, you're some lucky people, but he's the first one. So anytime you ever say Baruch Hashem, you are actually quoting Yitro. And that is a blessing. And that Hashem's blessing that Hashem blesses those who bless us and those who bless him. So to bless God is a blessing, to ask for more blessing to come to us. So he is the first one to see Hashem as the cause of it all, and of it all being a blessing for the Jewish people. Even though you can imagine how the Jewish people could be in therapy for years after experiencing the enslavement and Pharaoh and all the stuff, that you would be like, you know what, I just can't let go of my slave mentality, and it's really hard for me, and I want to move forward, but I can't. It's like the Jewish people, even though we had our moments, the Jewish people have always bounced back. Our entire society, the entire Jewish people, should be in deep therapy over the trauma that we have experienced as a people. Take your pick. Crusades, Inquisition, pogroms, take your pick, KKK, you just take your pick, whatever it is. We should have a definite problem. And yet somehow Hashem has blessed us. Not every single person, it walks out so easily, but Hashem has blessed us to be able to bounce back, and it is a huge blessing. So Yitro is saying, Baruch Hashem, that you see this all as Hashem saved you. Because you could say, well, you know what? Hashem put us in Egypt to begin with. So what's the big favor here? It's like, no, I see the whole thing very differently. So Yitro comes to give this very different perspective and to help the Jewish people have the correct perspective about what they have experienced. The next piece, and we love this, and this kind of goes along with our Tu B'Shvat Seder from last week, is that Yitro also exemplifies the ability to elevate physical activities to a spiritual level. Where do we see this? Also on page 397, and it is on verse 12. Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe, took an elevation offering and feast offerings for God, and Aaron and all the elders of Israel came to eat bread with the father-in-law of Moshe. And then it says specifically that they ate lifnei ha-Elohim. They ate before God. Now, on one hand, you'd think, well, the sacrifices, those are for God, because that's like kind of a religious thing. And the splitting, these are all kind of like religious things. But they sat down to a dinner. They sat down to pita, hummus, I don't know, manna, whatever else that they were eating. They sat down to a feast, just like a regular old feast. And this is what Yitro is teaching us about the Torah as well, which is the Torah is not about staying on top of Dale's mountain at Mount Sinai. We got the Torah from there, but then it comes down to earth. And we are engaged specifically in our eating. Seems to be a good indication of where we really are as people. So Rav Wolbe, who is no longer alive, a blessed memory, who wrote a lot about Musar, about proper conduct, said that it's interesting to note that in a yeshiva, the dining room is bigger usually than the base medrash, than the study hall. And you think like, well, does that mean like eating is more important than learning? It's like, no, it's where you see whether the learning had any impact on the people who are studying. Like, how are you eating? Are you saying a blessing before you take the meal? Are you pushing and shoving in line when you get your food? Are you saying thank you to the people who serve you or the people who prepared your food? Are you interrupting people? Do you have bad manners? Are you saying words of Torah? How is this all coming down? So this would be like in a job interview where their interview is one part and then they take you out to lunch and they see how you behave at the restaurant. Are you making eye contact with the waiter? Are you being polite to the other people who are at the table? Do you say thank you? How are you walking in? Are you saying, well, I have to have like, the best table of the house? I mean, how are you behaving? And when we see it, how people eat. It says, because if we do it the most often, it's the best way to tell where somebody is really, as they say, holding. So Yitro has this. So this feast is the feast of bringing together the spiritual teachings with how we act in the world. So you can really substitute anything else in there, how you drive down the street, how you wait in line at the bank, how you shop, are you ramming your buggy into people's heels? I mean, are you letting people go in front of you who have smaller carts? I mean, how are you acting in the world? And that's the feast part of Torah. What does it look like when this all is said and done, when you've learned? What does that learning look like to other people? And how are you acting? And this was the feast. So then I learned, I didn't have a chance to look it up, but there is a custom in Tunisia, the Jews of Tunisia, who have tonight, Thursday night, they have a Seudat Yitro. They have a Seuda commemorating Yitro's Seuda, Yitro's feast. And at that feast, there are prayers for people who need help, who are sick, who need to find a job, who need to find a mate, who need parnasa, livelihood, all of these things. And it is a feast that they have. And this is done by the Jews of Tunisia. And it started because there had been, if I understood this right, as I said, I only got 85% of this. I'm not sure I got this totally right, that there had been some sort of a plague and they had this feast and the plague ended in Tunisia or in this community or whatever it was. I don't know exactly how it all got started, but it started this custom of this feast of Yitro, and that it was done to help focus on bringing our Torah down to earth, right onto our table. And Sivan Meir, Rachab Meir said, our tables have become more interesting to us during coronavirus, where our tables have really turned into the place where we work, the place where we study, the place where we interact with people, the place where we do everything. And that we've always had the idea that our tables are an altar, that they are holy. Our tables are holy. But it really is just meant to be as symbol for our physical normal life is holy. When people think like, oh, we're supposed to serve God and walk with God, people have in mind like, we're supposed to be monks and nuns. It's like, we're not supposed to be. We're supposed to be regular people leading our lives, but in a way where the holiness pervades everything, so that we can tell that we are living an elevated life. So this was the purpose of Yitro's feast that he had with Aaron and Moshe and the elders of the Jewish people. So that was the feast piece. And that was all considered eating lifnei Hashem, that they ate before God, because a meal like that is before God, as opposed to, food fight or whatever that people do. Or, even these things, I have to say, I know people, there's a lot of things like on food channels or whatever about different food things, but there's some food things like, almost like, how much can you eat? Things that are really not appropriate for somebody who's seeking a spiritual life, how many ribs can you have? And like, I'm having a rib eating contest. I'm in a cake eating contest. It's like, there's some people who are very fine, who don't even go to all you can eat buffets. They think that it just is not a thing. It shouldn't, all you can eat buffet, the concept is just kind of not appropriate. It should be, you eat what you should eat to be healthy and maybe a little extra something for something special, a treat, but not all you can eat, where they give you a prize, like, if you finish the whatever, I don't know. So it's just something to think about, that in our world of excess, that this is kind of something that people take pride in, and we're not really into that. So our eating is supposed to be lifnei Hashem, in front of God. Like, would your mother really be proud of you for eating like that? And if the answer is no, then maybe that's not such a good idea. So so you think about of the times like a Greek orgy, where the vomitorium, where they would eat and then they would gag themselves and have a place to vomit so that they could eat and drink more. That's like not a Jewish thing. That's not a Jewish thing. So kind of crazy. Okay, but some of it, we may kind of do this to some extent in a lot of things of overdoing it. My niece worked for somebody, I'm not going to even say where or who, where the person had a collection of cars, like hundreds of cars. It's like, okay, what does that do for you? So it's like, Dayenu. It's like, what is enough? So that's part of it too, is having it be before Hashem is like, are there no limits? Like, what are the limits? We shouldn't feel too bad, because the people in times where they had to spend their whole day just trying to find food, it's not that they were so virtuous. If they would have had a lot of food, they would have eaten it. Our challenge is that we have it, not everybody, we have it at our fingertips. And so we have to make a decision about where we're going to draw the line and say no more. And that's in every aspect of consumer goods. It's like, we can have kind of everything and anything. So how much is enough? How much is enough? So that's Lifnei Hashem, is that all of our physical activities should be Lifnei Hashem, before God, what's considered an appropriate amount. And this is something that one should judge for oneself and not for another person, because it's very easy to point the finger and say, well, what they do is totally over the top. What I do is restrained and normal. So this is a self-directed question, not a directed towards other people question. But the whole thing is like, Lifnei Hashem, Lifnei Hashem. Okay, the last part is on page 397, chapter 18, verse 11. Yitro says, now I know that Hashem is the greatest of all gods. And by saying that, verse 11, when he says this, Ata yadati, now I know. The question is, what does that mean now he knows? This is a person who is willing to be intellectually honest about what they see and what they learn and what they come to know. That we're taking somebody who was a Midianite idol-worshiping priest who has explored all of the various theologies around and has made a decision and has said, now I know that God is the greatest. And this is not somebody who has a sense of relative truth, or everybody has their narrative, or any of these things that are all wishy-washy about what's real and what's not real. This is, now I know that God is the greatest. And then he changes his life based on that. That's really hard, because talk about wanting to eat our cake and have it too. We would really like to have a philosophy that allows us to continue doing whatever I really want to do. And then I can hold as an intellectual interest some other thing, but not really embrace it. And Yitro is the person who is willing to forego, which is even harder than foregoing comfort, is to forego and realize that what you had believed was not correct, and to choose truth. It says that this is the gift of Yitro. Patricia.
Does he stay with the Jewish people, or I thought he left? So.
He does leave, and it says to go back to convert other people, and then he rejoins. And in the book of Bamidbar, in fact, in the book of Bamidbar, it says chapter 10, verses 29 through 31. It's on page 785. There is he's going to leave, and Moshe is prevailing upon him to stay. And the question is, does he stay or does he not stay? But in the end, one of the things that we know historically is that Yitro's descendants, family, is given land in the land of Israel, right near my apartment, in Jericho, right near Jericho. They were given that land, and those are the descendants of Yitro, lived there. And they were given that because they joined the Jewish people. Since the land is divided by tribes, and he wasn't part of a tribe because he was coming from the outside, so then he is given this special land there, right near Jericho.
So is he become a Jew or?
Yes. Mhm.
Yes, he does. Okay.
Yes, he does. He converts. He becomes Jewish.
Cool.
He accepts the Torah. And then it's also beautiful, Yitro's name with the Vav in there for Miss Andy there, that Yitro's name has 3 of the 4 letters of the word Torah. So Torah is spelled Taf, Vav, Resh, Hey. Taf, Vav, Resh, Hey. And Yitro is Yud, Taf, Resh, Vav. So except for the Yud, his name's the letters, he has 3 of the 4 letters of the word Torah. As does Ruth, our other person who converted in, because Ruth has Resh, Vav, Taf. So Ruth's name is in Yitro's name as well. And those are the 2 people who are our paradigms of people who join the Jewish people. And they both have the word Torah already in them. So it's like it's already there, but it's not just there in potential, they manifest it. And that ultimately is each of our jobs. It says the Torah is in each of us. It says in the Talmud, it says that when we were in utero, the angels taught us Torah. And before we were born, touched us right here, made that little mark right underneath your nose, and made us forget it. And you're like, thanks a lot. That's all I need is to learn Torah and then forget it. What does that do for me? It says, the angels taught it to us almost like by osmosis. It's just part of us. But when we come into the physical world, we have to gain it through our 5 senses. And so we have to regain it. But what the having known it before does is it gives us the ability to recognize it when we learn it. It's almost like that aha, it's like, I knew that. I knew that. That makes sense. That resonates. Like, why does it make sense or resonate? It's because you already knew it. So my metaphor for that is origami. I remember my friend Belinda Wong in California teaching me origami, which I found really hard to do. But what she finally did is she took the origami piece. I know how to make exactly one thing that I've known since 6th grade, and I've never expanded my skill, but I can make it for you. It's a little dish. She folded the paper all up and made it. And then she unfolded it and gave it to me, unfolded. But because the creases were already there, I could follow it. So then as she gave me I couldn't have done it without the instruction, because then it was just like a bunch of paper with folds on it. But then when she said, put the corners in, I was like, oh, that's already folded there. Yep, that works just fine. And then it actually turned out. It was like, I already know that. So, I mean, this stuck with me forever. I don't think I was taught in the womb. It was 5th grade. But anyway, so this is how it works, is that it's already in us. And so just like in Yitro and Ruth, which also tells us that it's not just given to Jewish people, because we know anybody can join the Jewish people, unless you're, an Amalekite, I'm sorry, unless you're a male Moabite or an Ammonite, anybody can join the Jewish people, which means that every human being has the ability to absorb and take in and accept and fulfill the Torah. It can't be something like, oh, only Jewish people can do this. I'm sorry, you're out. It's like, absolutely not. We're totally open. So everyone has that possibility. And both Ruth and Yitro, who are our 2 people who have converted, the Torah of them was in them, in their names to begin with. And then they manifest that in their lives. And that ultimately is what we're being told at Mount Sinai. Yes, this is going to be an amazing moment and we're receiving the Torah, but if we carry it around as an external thing and say, oh, we've got the Torah and I studied the Torah, but it doesn't become manifested in who we are, we didn't really get it. It means we're carrying it, but we don't really have it. So our goal is to truly receive it, to live it, and to be like Yitro. So now we see at the end, there could be nothing better than to have the Parsha of receiving, of giving, and the receiving of Torah be Parsha Yitro. That as soon as we hear his name, it's like, oh, I know all about Yitro. He is the one who listened and then he also did. He connected the dots and he acted. He was willing to forego his comfort and his status and everything, like in Alech Lecha, as Judy said, exactly the same way. He had a joy of being able to see everything from one whole picture, the chedva of the echad, of the vayichad, that the joy came from being able to see the whole big picture. He was the first one to say Baruch Hashem, who saw that it was God's hand in everything, and that he showed us and demonstrated the ability to take everything physical of all aspects of our physical life and have them be all lifnei Hashem. And that in that he becomes the person to demonstrate for us exactly how it is that we can come to the Torah, and that finally the ability to come mentally and say, now I know. Because the Jewish people, once they receive Torah, that's basically what they are saying is, now we know. That beforehand, they were a family, they were tribes, they were a family, they were a people, but they were not the Am Segula. They were not the treasured nation that had been chosen to live this life that Yitro manifested as one person, that we are given as an ongoing opportunity, challenge, and really a a covenant to be the people who manifest this for the entire world. So this Parsha of Yitro, maybe you want to have a Yitro feast tonight, and just think about that and make it. I'm going to look up about Tunisia and find out more about that. If you look it up and find out that I completely misunderstood what she said because I didn't really get it, let me know. Or I'll actually probably find out. But it was something like that. So I'm interested in finding out more about that. Helene.
So when you say that so many, that besides being Jewish, other people have Torah in them, and when you think about it, even in like Talmud and all the laws that we have, so much is, in our laws,
Which they got from the Talmud.
what they got from, exactly.
They took from us.
Right. So a lot of what we do, emotionally, morally, legally, is really stems from what Torah is all about.
Exactly. So civilization, which is why I said that this should be called Parshat Torah, that the Torah has been the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai to the Jewish people, and our carrying it and embodying it and learning it and transmitting it from generation to generation,
Right.
has been the single most profound thing that has affected humanity in history.
And it's
all of humanity.
Right.
And people say, well, different people have different truths and different this. Like, no, they don't. We are all human beings created in the image of God. And we all have the ability to rise. It's actually insulting to say to other people, you don't really have the ability to live up to any kind of a holy life because you're whatever. It's like, we don't have that. You absolutely, you're created in the image of God.
Yeah.
The Torah can be manifested in any human being who chooses to connect to it. And they don't have to become Jewish. The laws for the rest of the world are, if you're not Jewish, there are 7 laws, but all of them are considered the essence of civilization, basic civilization, which you would think the world has achieved a lot, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. So we still have work to do with all of humanity, not just the Jewish people. So Renee, yes, and then we will close.
I'm sorry, this is kind of a complex question. So Moshe had 2 sons.
Yes.
With Sephora, Eliezer and who?
Gershom.
Gershom.
Mm-hmm.
With a mem at the end, right?
Yes.
I think so. So, okay. My question is, why, like our own sons, why didn't your sons continue? And then it kind of like inadvertent, my thought was, well, they actually got raised by Yitro because Moshe was off saving the Jewish people. And so maybe the sons picked up. But then my theory doesn't hold anything because Yitro came back and he got land.
Yes. And there's a lot of different midrashim about it. So you're right, it's a more complicated, and I don't know enough about it to really answer your question. But one of the things it does point out is that just because someone is the leader doesn't mean that the children are automatically qualified to do something. Aaron's children were, and Moshe's children were not. And Moshe, poor Moshe, and we get to this at the end of the Torah, when he's dividing the land and all of the inheritance to everybody, and he's Aaron and the priests and everything else, and he's not going to the land, and his sons are wherever they are. It's like, I think this is the comfort to a lot of parents who are like, what happened to my kid? I was doing this, this, and this, and how come they didn't really
get it?
Follow? They didn't get it. So it happens. But there's a lot more, Renee, that I don't know about. There's very interesting midrashim about Moshe's sons. So, but you are right. We don't really hear from them again, unfortunately.
Ellen, can you hear me? It's Pam.
I sure can, Pammy.
I know you need to go, but I think I've sent you some of these. Every week I listen to a Noahide Christian.
Oh,
So
interesting.
he's keeping those 7 laws.
Yes.
And he is co-hosting with a very Orthodox religious rabbi in Jerusalem.
Yes.
And it's just fascinating.
I would love for you to send that to me, Pammy, because I have seen something online, because I have a friend who's actually was interested in that. The Noahides are amazing. And
yes, they're so supportive of the Jewish people.
Right.
For bringing, but they're also following those 7, they call them the Noahide laws. And I always wonder which ones are they. And I know I've learned before.
Oh, I can tell you that what they are, basically, they are to believe in God. No murder, no stealing, no sexual immorality, no eating an animal like a, what's it called? They can't take a limb off of a living animal and eat it.
Wow.
So that's their kashrut law. And there's one other one, not to blaspheme God. And then one positive, they're all negatives. And there's one positive, which is to establish courts of justice that will enforce all the other 6 laws. And these are the laws that we would consider basic civilization, that humanity cannot function without this. And it's not like that we're being triumphalistic, like you have to be like us. It's like, no, you don't. You have to be civilized. And we have a definition for what that looks like. And it's not our definition,
and this man,
it's God's definition.
Right. Okay. I will send it to you, and then anyone else who's interested, they can ask you about it. It's just fabulous. They're so supportive of the Jewish people and of the way we live and of Israel also.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And what's interesting is there are, there will and there should be yeshivas for Noahide learning, because they study all of Torah.
Yep.
Even though they are not obligated to do all the laws, just like we study the laws of the Kohanim, even though we're not Kohens. So they study everything in order to know, but they are obligated in what they're obligated to do.
They just don't convert. It's a very interesting.
No, they don't need to convert. They do not convert.
It's so interesting. So they can. So that's a whole other topic. So
yeah, we don't believe that people need to convert. You absolutely do not need to be convert. We don't have the idea that you have to be saved or any of these things. We judge by behavior, which is basically what the Noahide laws demonstrate, is civilized behavior. You can believe in the tooth fairy as your God if you want to, along with God. That's a-okay. If that's what you think would be helpful and would get you on the right path, then you go for it. But a Jewish person can't do that, but a non-Jewish person can. So
God, that's so interesting.
It's really interesting. So ladies, thank you so much. I'm happy to stay on for a little bit longer for anybody who has any other questions or comments. If not, thank you so much. And I just want to apologize. I did my recording of my class on the audio. I forgot to turn on the Zoom until a lot way through it. So the Zoom recording will not be there, but you're all here, so you probably don't care. So anyway, but if anybody asks you, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ellen.
Can you send me that link when you get it?
Thank you.
Ellen, can you send me that link when you get it from Pam? That sounds so interesting.
Absolutely. I'll send it out to everybody, because I think that's really interesting to be able to have that information.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Parsha.
Thank you.
Hi, how
Good
is
job,
Benjamin Yisrael?
Binyamin Yisrael is doing okay.
Not great.
He's
I missed the beginning.
I shared at the beginning of the class that he's in the dorm with the other yeshiva boys.
Oh, he's out at the house.
He's out of the house, which is very good, because that means Dahlia can sleep in their bedroom. And the 2 boys are now out of quarantine, but Dahlia and the girls are in quarantine. But Dahlia needs to have access to the kitchen, so the boys are in their quarantine rooms. But it's more to save themselves from Dahlia and the girls. It's very confusing.
It's really complicated.
Is that very unusual to have also taken one shot and then still get the virus?
Not unusual at all.
Really? I have not heard that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why you want to get but now once you get it, however, once you get corona, then you have to wait longer to get the second one, because there's 2, it takes a while for the virus to
Wow.
Everybody. So
because he did have one, he had one
Yeah,
shot,
he
or
and-
he had both?
no, he and,
Really
and
one.
Byron, he and Dahlia each had one.
Well, maybe that'll make this much less.
Yes, it could
You
be
know,
that
the
it makes it
longevity of
less,
this will be
and
much
it's, you know,
less,
he
and
just
the
feels more
severity.
like fluey. I mean, it's not, thank God, it's not,
He's not having trouble
horrible.
breathing or anything.
Thank
Please,
God, no. Otherwise,
Yeah,
if he did,
no.
I would, because I like linked right to him. Yes. And hello,
Yeah.
Karen McSpadden from Alaska has joined us. It's so nice to have you.
Wow.
How did she find the class?
She is Alex's mother-in-law, Alex, in the Sheslovsky's
Oh,
Jewish
really?
experience.
How nice.
So he put us in touch with each other. So I'm so glad you joined us. And Valerie, hello, it's nice to have you too.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to have you with us. All right, does
I'll see
anybody
you
else have any
soon.
questions? I'll look forward to it. Everybody have a wonderful Shabbos, Yitro.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much, Ellyn.
All right, my
Thank
pleasure.
you, Ellyn. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Shabbat
take
shalom.
care. Bye-bye.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Ellyn.
Thank you.